Hey, I was wondering what your take is on this. The SEC has traditionally had its power centered around Georgia, Alabama, Florida. Do you think it's possible the balance of power could shift to the Texas and Louisiana area, with Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC? Let's talk about this. So that is very, very far out there for someone who lives in Alabaster, Alabama, or Sandy Springs, Georgia. Those are suburbs of Birmingham and Atlanta, respectively. I'm going to get back to Florida in a second because I don't think the SEC's revolved around Florida for a little while. But it did once upon a time. And they could have something to say about this. I think that's where the balance of power is right now. The power has been with Alabama and Georgia. They're the two best programs in the conference. They have for a long time been now the two best programs in the conference. Any given 3 or 4 year stretch, we're going on like a decade now, where those have been the two most consistent programs, which is convenient for people in the South because Birmingham and Atlanta are sort of the two epicenters from a media standpoint in the SEC. I mean, most folks who work in the SEC footprint in the regional or national media space live in either Birmingham or Atlanta, and I would say Nashville finishes a distant third, even though that's where I live. So is this possible, first off? Could the shift happen? Is the potential there? Because frankly, it doesn't matter if Missouri ever dominated. The balance of power wouldn't shift like up to Missouri. That's impractical. I think it is possible for it to shift a little further west / maybe west-southwest, though. And the reason is because the premier branding is there. The premier media markets are there, but the premier branding is there. And I really think there's a world where if Texas were to dominate in the SEC and Oklahoma were to dominate in the SEC, and I mean be a 10-win per year caliber program, if Texas A&M also fit that description, Arkansas, I would love for you guys to come along and you would fit this and make it a nice quartet. But if just those three programs were sustained winners, think about what it would feel like in the SEC. First off, you absolutely would have a power shift. That doesn't mean Georgia goes anywhere or Alabama goes anywhere. It just means that there would be a little balance of power shift. But also the other thing is the sort of endemic media model in the SEC would be tested. Because right now, if Texas A&M were to have done something once upon a time, it's a bunch of folks in Atlanta talking about him. It's a bunch of folks in Birmingham talking about him. And then it's the Houston media market. But really, if you get Texas and Texas A&M and Oklahoma, not only do you get Houston, Dallas, Austin, OKC, you get all these different media markets that otherwise would not have talked about SEC as much in the past, but think about the flavor. This is you as a fan now. Think about how that feels, because if I'm not mistaken, if I didn't know any better, and A&M and Texas and Oklahoma were playing high-level ball, and then Alabama was as well, Auburn was as well, Georgia was as well, South Carolina was as well, you know, if I didn't know any better, it would almost come to feel like two different conferences, or at least, and imagine this concept, divisions within a conference. You guys know the culture is different in Texas than it is Georgia. You know the culture in Oklahoma is unique unto itself, period, and they'll be the first people to tell you that and pride themselves on it. Being someone who storm chases there frequently, I know that to be the case. Best homemade jerky in the country that I've had is in the state of Oklahoma, by the way. Just a little side note there. But if those teams collectively were good, and let's say Georgia was good, Tennessee was good, think about how different the Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama bubble would feel as opposed to the Texas A&M, Oklahoma bubble. To me, that's how you inject the flavor of divisions and little mini conferences back into what is now a super conference sport, and that is the answer to the question that we just got. Yes, it would shift. Now, Florida's a wild card. If you are 18 years old, it's been a little while since Florida was a national championship player in this sport, and so quickly a generation has gone by. Remember, in college football, we view a generation as a decade. And so a generation has gone by since Florida was a bona fide national championship contending program. But once upon a time, they were that for a long run. The Steve Spurrier era, and then also then when Urban Meyer came there, you had a double dip, and so you had people who were 25 years old who had known basically their entire lives Florida to be a big power player on the national stage. Well, what that did, and what it would do again, if let's say Billy Napier were to bring Florida back to national relevance, is There's a funny thing that happens when Florida is a premier player in the national scene. Yes, you get the Florida media markets sort of inserted into that SEC hurricane, but the thing about Florida being good is it brings a group of people who otherwise just flat out would not be involved in the conversation. Because Florida's not the South, which people from Minnesota and Wisconsin are shocked to hear, but people in the South nod their heads at with just tacit agreement. You guys know Florida's not the South. It is south of states in the South, but it is not considered the South. Nor is the Orlando media market or Miami media market considered a Southern media market. And that's the only SEC school in the state. So if Florida's not doing anything, folks in Miami and Orlando are not talking about the SEC nearly as much, fractionally as much, as they are if Florida's good. The reason I say that, because yeah, you could have a little contingent of Texas and A&M and OU flavor over here. You could have a contingent of sort of SEC Eastern flavor. If Florida's good, it's its own world. It's like a little independent world, a little independent bubble, even within the SEC. And the other one that I feel is kind of like that is LSU. When LSU is good, LSU does not feel like they fit into or are lumped in with a group of other schools and other programs. Louisiana might as well be its own country, just like Florida might as well be its own country. A lot of you think I say that insultingly, but as sure as I say that, folks in Louisiana are pounding their fists saying, you better believe we are. Folks in Florida say, yeah, absolutely we are. Folks in Oklahoma feel the same way about Oklahoma, by the way. So yeah, I think a balance of power could happen. A shift could happen, but they've got to be good. You know, Texas A&M has to be good. Oklahoma has to be good. Texas has to be good, and it all kind of needs to happen at the same time.